For analysis, Bill Crane joins me from outside Atlanta. He's a principal at CSI Crane, a corporate communications and public relations agency. Good to see you again, Bill. There is a sense that culturally and politically things are spiralling out of control. Are we losing our sense of law and order in the US?
I don't know. I think that might be a bit extreme, but we've certainly seen on the rise politically motivated shootings, whether we want to talk about the shooting at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control here in Atlanta, not very far from where I'm sitting a few weeks ago, or we want to talk about Charlie Kirk's murder today. At least the first reason rationale you think about is his political activism, starting Turning Point USA at the age of 18 in 2012, and building that into an organization with 54 chapters across the country on college campuses, and registering hundreds of thousands of young people who are now supporting conservative causes and candidates like Donald Trump.
We live in a society in the US where wide gun ownership and many people are very well trained with some of these guns. What kind of leadership has to happen to better assure safety, not just for political figures, but for the wider public?
I think there's two different paths that need to be pursued. I do believe we need to better regulate or close the loophole that exists here in private gun sales, gun transfers between families. But in addition to gun regulation, because we could look at the states in the United States that have the most strict gun laws, Illinois, and the 54 shootings that occurred over the Labor Day weekend, and we can look at mental health. We have a growing problem in the United States of young men in between the ages of the late teens and the early 30s who seem to feel like they are in no way connected to the society they live in, that there's no future for them, that there's no partner that they could live a life with. And they seem to think their only way out is to make themselves famous by killing others, and oftentimes ending that with killing themselves. So we've got, I think, a mental health issue that's really critical that started in this electronic age when many young people prefer a handheld electronic device to the company of a human. And I think we have to pursue both of those things. We have to restrict access to firearms, require training and use of firearms. I'm a member of the National Rifle Association. I have a handgun and a rifle, but I don't use them for recreational purposes. And I'm trained in safety and disarming and taking them apart. And I think that should be part of gun ownership. But again, on a separate track, all of these folks that have been engaged in these mass shootings, with the exception of the gentleman in Las Vegas a few years ago who was in his 50s or 60s, are young people, most of them white men, who feel disassociated from society. And that's an issue that also deserves resource and attention.
Interestingly, though, Donald Trump himself, of course, we know, was a target of political assassination on the campaign trail. And Trump has had a big focus on crime lately in his policy, domestic policy, bringing federal forces into cities like LA, DC. And just last week, he said that he was at war with Chicago. How can leaders come together at a time like this to condemn violence in a way that bridges the divide between social violence and political violence?
There are several different schools of thought, but I will speak to the war on crime, if you will, that the president is trying to enact. We do know that in many urban centers, a lot of the crime is committed by repeat offenders. And in a lot of these urban centers, that they have waived what used to be cash bail that would cause someone awaiting trial to be sitting in jail, awaiting in a detention facility, awaiting the trial and adjudication to determine if they're guilty or innocent. They didn't have financial resources, they sat in jail. The elimination of cash bail in most urban centers has put a lot of those repeat offenders back on the streets. We had an epidemic a few years ago here of carjacking, armed robbery involving the theft of an automobile, which has also become a gang initiation ceremony, if you will. Well, some of the young men that we were arresting were on their 20th and 30th charge, particularly during the pandemic, hadn't gone to trial on the first charge, were released on their own recognizance and stole another car. So we also have to acknowledge there are some people in our society who are going to perpetually commit crimes because there are very few other options for them. And that, again, is another societal issue as well as a mental health issue.
All right, Bill Crane, great to get your insight tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show.